The Duke by Anna Cowan. I read an arc of this based on the recommendation of noted lesbian fantasy author C.L. Clarke, who gave this 5 stars. I wouldn't call this a 5-star book, but I did enjoy it. It has a very cool premise that I genuinely really like. So this is a historical novel, but it's sort of a reimagining of 1800s England where women, wealthy women, are actually allowed to have titles and power and be openly gay. So the titular duke in question here is a woman, and she's a hot butch. You love to see it. I really, really like the first chapter of this. I think it does a great job of setting up the story. Well, I think it does a great job of setting up a story. I think the sort of rest of the novel doesn't necessarily match the tone of this first chapter, but I still really like this first chapter. So we follow our main character, Celine, who is a poor French woman who is very clever, and she works her way up the ranks of French society by becoming a prostitute, like a luxury prostitute, a high-end prostitute, and she gets involved with this wealthy man, Bastien, and he is about to die. This is a very turbulent period in France where all of the nobility are being executed by the commoners. And Celine receives intel that her boyfriend is going to die. And that is very world-shattering for her because she has no title, she has no money of her own, she's entirely dependent on having a rich man take care of her, basically. She discovers this information that he's going to die at this party, and also at this party she meets the Duke, who is an English duke named Kate Howard. She has come to France because she is friends with Bastien, and she also knows he is going to die. And he has some incriminating evidence against her. She once wrote him a letter that detailed her plans to take over her family line. She was not first in line to be heir to her family fortunes and to earn the title of Duke. She was second in line, so she had to do some finagling, some very unethical finagling that basically got most of her family killed so that she could assume power at a young age. But of course, if that information gets out, she will be ruined. It will be a complete blight on her family, and it will just absolutely ruin her. So Celine catches the Duke looking for this letter and recognizes the Duke in that she is a powerful woman who could get her out of France before her boyfriend dies, and before she maybe gets murdered as well, or before she's completely destitute and has nothing. So she's once again trying to climb the social ladders by attaching herself to this Duke, someone even better than her boyfriend. And they have immediate chemistry. There's a lot of smut in this first chapter very quickly. I did have one problem, which is it's kind of an insta-love thing. Like, there's an instant attraction, which is totally fine, because they're both, like, hot. Again, Kate Howard, the hot Duke, hot butch Duke, you love it. And then Celine is literally, like, the most desired prostitute in France, so she's obviously very beautiful. And a good smooth talker, too, so she's very desirable. She's the most beautiful woman ever, basically. But even while they're hooking up, there's, like, little lines that hint that this is going to be a romance, you know? Like, oh, I don't know this woman, but I'm strangely drawn to her in some way, emotionally. Which, I mean, it's just insta-love. It's just one of those romances where, like, you know they're going to get together at the end. You know they're going to fall in love and live happily ever after. It's a bit contrived. It's a bit love at first sight, like, literally. But whatever. It's a romance novel. You kind of expect that to some extent. However, the book sets these two characters up as very morally gray. Again, like, Kate murdered her whole family, basically, not with her bare hands. Celine is a conniving liar. Kate is involved in, like, treason, basically, against her own family. So they're both set up as very dark characters, and also the Duke basically uses her. There's also a thing about, like, Bastien was expecting the Duke to come and was, like, going to give Celine to her as just, like, a gift. It's like, oh, you're an honored guest in my house. Here's the hottest prostitute in the country. She's yours while you're staying here. So there's, like, a weird, like, ownership thing, which is kind of dark. And, like, this first chapter is quite dark in numerous ways, like, darkly sexual, dark just in, like, the politics of the world and the way the society operates, dark in, like, there's murder and, you know, people dying and shady pasts, and the Duke is presented as this very sort of violent, sort of evil, cold-hearted figure. And Celine is trying to go back to England with her, and the Duke is like, nah, and just leaves her here to die, doesn't think twice about her, sees this beautiful woman, has sex with her, and then basically just leaves her for dead. But Celine, being crafty, doesn't forget that. She finds the letter, the incriminating letter that the Duke was looking for, and 3 years later returns to England with the letter and is basically like, you're going to take me in, you're going to find me a wealthy English husband, I'm going to become like a duchess or a lady, someone in high society, officially by marriage, the way I've never had, or I'm gonna tell everyone that you murdered your entire family and are a piece of shit. So 3 years later, which is when most of this book takes place, Celine blackmails Kate into doing her bidding, basically, and finding her a husband so that she can enter into high society, officially. And that is most of the book, is like court politics and, you know, just like day-to-day wealthy English people lives. It's not like a dark erotica book. I didn't expect this to be erotica, but because they just like immediately bone in the first chapter, I thought there'd be a lot of that. You know, like, oh, like, while you're staying in my home, you're going to have to sleep with me while I'm finding you a husband, but that doesn't happen, which I didn't expect based on the tone of the first chapter, which is fine, but, like, be prepared for that. Like, if you read the first chapter of this on, like, a sample preview, like, before you buy the book, and you're like, yes, this is a dark, smutty romance, it's not, so don't be fooled by that. But also, if you read the first chapter and you're like, oh, this is a dark, smutty romance, I was just looking for something historical and focused on, like, the history, you actually will like this, because it is mostly, like, day-to-day life and, you know, marriage shenanigans for these people. And court stuff, because as the Duke, she actually has representation in Parliament and is able to influence bills and, like, vote and shit and make laws and stuff. So she actually has power and is involved in politics, which is cool. I really like that aspect of this, the sort of reimagining of society. Although that's like really the only thing that changed. I mean, if you got really, really, really into it, I mean, women having rights, or at least wealthy women having rights, would, for seemingly forever, would like completely change how you would think about women in your society, to some extent, wealthy women at least. So some of the sexism would look different than it actually did. I don't know that that's fully explored in this book, maybe a bit, because, I mean, the men in Parliament do mostly respect the women in Parliament, but I think that would probably change your society more than this book really lets on, if you really thought about it. And like what that means for like women to have power and to be able to bestow power and hold power, and allow their heirs to inherit their power. Anyway, that's a side tangent. But I was also going to say that this book isn't as dark as you think. Again, we set the Duke up as the sort of villainous character with this shady past, killed people, all these rumors about her, where she's very violent and like killed a housemaid. There's a rumor that she did that. People are quite scared of her. She's very powerful. She's like the most powerful woman in England. And I was into that. I really wanted like a hot, evil, butch, powerful woman in the 1800s, because that's not a thing, you know? We don't see that in these historical novels. These are always characters who, one, usually aren't butch because they can't be, unless they're masquerading as men, but this is a butch woman who doesn't have to masquerade as a man because she is allowed to be butch and be a woman and have power in that way, and also be gay and marry a woman if she wants to. Usually these queer characters would be relegated to playing the role of outcasts and not having power in society, and having to thwart that or subvert it in some way. They'd be working against the system instead of literally being the system. And that sort of inherent underdog story kind of makes them more sympathetic, and also because we understand their plight. But here, this character doesn't necessarily have a plight as a queer woman in this society. She's just kind of an entitled rich bitch. Until she isn't. Again, I wanted an evil butch. I wanted just like an evil, powerful, cutthroat, heartless lesbian parliament figure. Just because that's something you literally cannot see in any historical novel that doesn't take place in a semi-fictional, reimagined world. But instead, the book immediately works to defang her and make her like a good person. Like the thing about all of her family being murdered, that wasn't really her intention. And the rumor about her killing her maid, not true. And a lot of the things she does are actually to help people, and she gets a bad reputation because she has a rival. There's this old man in Parliament who, like, owns some of the same, like, properties as her, and it's like, well, he's, like, fighting for her over property. There's, like, a mine. It's very Gentleman Jack. There's some talk of coal, and, you know, who controls the mines and the workers and how the workers are treated. I do think there's some Gentleman Jack influence here. Gentleman Jack is better. But it's also very different because that's like a legitimate historical piece that literally happened in real life for the most part. I'm sure the show is dramatized, but you know what I mean. But anyway, the Duke has a bad reputation, and she's not actually that terrible of a person. She's still done some questionable things. She's still, you know, a woman in power who, you know, maybe doesn't know or care about the lower classes as much. Although there is some talk of that, again, with the mines. She wants the people in the mines to have, like, a better life. Basically, she's misunderstood, and the book works to make her very sympathetic and, like, a good person, a secretly good person, pretty immediately after establishing that she's evil, the evil hot Duke, which was kind of disappointing. Just because, I don't know, I just thought if she was evil, it would be different. That's kind of what I was expecting, and that's just kind of what I wanted. That's personal preference. Maybe you want her to be, you know, a good person, which I think that's what this author wanted. I think the idea was that since this is a romance and these two are going to end up together, they can't be terrible people. You know, you don't want Celine, who is this poor woman who was forced into prostitution, even though she's a liar and a cheat. Like, you understand why she lied and cheated, because she was a woman with no power, unlike the Duke, who was a woman with all the power. So Celine's a very sympathetic character. She's not evil the way the Duke is evil. And so you don't want her to end up in a unhealthy, super toxic relationship, I guess is the thought process there. And so the Duke can't actually be hot and evil. She's just hot and secretly good. And, like, you get, like, little moments of, like, acceptable possessiveness. You know, when you read a romance novel, I feel like this applies to a lot of straight romance novels, where, like, the man is, like, in charge and, like, has the power, but, you know, is a softie deep down and is still a good person, even though he's kind of rough and tumble. That this book kind of goes into that. I guess it's a romance trope. I guess that's what people like to read. I don't know, it's a little weird in a lesbian novel, but maybe that's just because I think all those straight books are weird because I'm a lesbian. So the book kind of retcons its initial premise. And is like, oh, you thought she was hot and evil. No, she's a good person. And they're gonna live happily ever after and be really good partners and really match each other, because the Duke has all of this power and influence, and Celine has the smarts and the street smarts, and so they're able to work together. And although that was a little contrived, I thought Celine was, like, too smart at some points, or the Duke was too dumb at some points. There's a big plot point about a bill that Lord Roth, who was the Duke's nemesis, is trying to pass in Parliament, and there's, like, a secret clause in there that's gonna, like, fuck over the Duke, and the Duke doesn't even realize it, like, didn't even read the bill, like, doesn't care. No one else has realized this clause is in there. It would fuck over a lot of people, and Celine is the only one who, like, recognizes what's going to happen, and she's, like, thinking, like, 3 moves in advance, like, oh, if this happens, then this'll happen, and this'll happen, and that'll screw you over, so you shouldn't do that. And the Duke's like, whoa, she's so smart. I never would have known. This would have been terrible if she weren't here to tell me things that I should probably know as a member of Parliament, and should probably pay more attention to, honestly. So that felt a bit contrived at times. And I think that's, like, my main criticism of this book, is at times it feels a bit contrived or forced, or plays into tropes, or goes places that aren't necessarily natural because it needs to happen for the story. Like, Celine needs to be smarter than the Duke in order for the Duke to value her as, like, an equal partner and not just be like, oh, she's hot. I want to marry the hot lady because she's hot. She's like, oh, I want to marry the smart lady because she's smart and it's just a bonus that she's hot. You know, that's what you want in your romance novel. You can't just, it can't be, you know, carnal base attraction. It has to be more than that. So sometimes things felt a little forced or heavy-handed. Some things felt manufactured for the sake of the story and the character arcs. And it didn't always feel incredibly natural. But that's not to say this was a bad book, because it wasn't. I enjoyed it. I think it's like a 3-star. It's a good historical romance. I like the twist of the butch, lesbian, out, historical lord, lady, duke. I love the idea of just taking our world and changing this one thing, which changes so much in terms of these social dynamics of these people and the stories queer people are allowed to have in historical novels like this. This is something totally different that I haven't seen before. So that's really cool. But I think it could have been executed a little bit better. But I liked it. I also like some of the side characters. I almost forgot to mention that. The Duke has, like, sort of rakish cousin who is also not a duke. I think she's a lord. But she's sort of a wealthy woman. I don't know if she's gay. I'm gonna say she's gay because I wanted her to be gay. She's kind of interesting. And then there's Lord Roth, the nemesis. He has a bastard daughter who's, like, actually fucking evil. Low-key, she was a little bit more interesting than the Duke because she was allowed to be a little batshit fucking crazy. She could be a bad person. Actually, I wanted to see more of her, like, at the end, because she was really getting screwed over. Since she was a bastard child, she wasn't an heir to her father's fortune, but she was kind of her father's favorite because, like, she did the messy work for him. Like, she'd kill people and threaten people and, like, was, like, really looking out for him, even though she didn't necessarily get anything in return. I mean, she must have. I'm sure he gave her money and stuff, but, like, she doesn't have the title and everything that he does. She was cool, and I kind of wanted more of her. And I kind of liked her and Celine. There was, like, one scene where I was like, ooh, this is, like, the dark sort of romance that I was promised with the evil lesbian. But obviously that doesn't really go anywhere with those two. They don't have any kind of sexual or romantic arc. Definitely wouldn't be romantic because Markham is the girl's name. She's pretty. She was actually evil, so she can't be the love interest because she's actually evil. I did kind of want to hear more about her, especially at the end of the book where, I don't know, her plan gets foiled. Spoiler alert, there's a happy ending for these characters. I kind of wanted to see her react to failing. You know, like, what did the villain do upon failing in her evil schemes? I also just wanted more of her. I expected her to turn on her father for, like, denying her, you know, her right as heir or something like that. I thought she was just a really cool, complex character, but she's a side character, so she didn't get fully explored as much as I wanted, just because I thought she was cool, because she was actually evil. And she was sort of allowed to be evil. Well, I mean, like, murder and threatening people is not allowed in the society, but, like, if you're rich and you're sneaky about it, you can kind of get away with it. You know, I sort of wanted to see that. I wanted to see women abuse the system of power that we only get to see men abuse in these types of stories. That was what I wanted, and I didn't really get that, unfortunately. But that's just not what the author wanted to do. That's just what I wanted to read. And it's just a different book, so it's not necessarily a fault. I was just personally a little disappointed by that. I would have done something different, or expected something different out of this, but maybe you won't. Maybe you just want to see two women openly love each other in a historical romance, which is pretty damn cool, I gotta say. So I do recommend this if you're really into historical romance, and you want a queer twist, and a butch twist, and you want to see women with power, and gay women with power, in the 1800s in England. So it's pretty cool. Not a bad book at all. But also not 5 stars. What Kool-Aid were you drinking, C.L. Clarke? Like a 3-star for me, I do recommend this. A pretty cool, unique historical novel. Some parts are unique. Some parts aren't that unique. I guess it plays into a lot of tropes. I said that. But it has a unique premise, and I like that. So it's definitely got something going for it.